There's a number you have in your head. You might not have written it down. You might not have even said it out loud, but it's there. It's been there for years. A specific number, an amount of money in your account, a salary, a net worth, that once you reach it would finally make you feel okay, finally make you feel safe. Maybe it started small. Maybe when you were younger, broke, or just starting out, you told yourself that if you could just get to $1,000 saved, you'd breathe easier. Then you got there, and the number moved. It became 10,000. Then you got there, and it became 100,000. And somewhere along the way, you stopped asking why the number kept moving, because that question felt too uncomfortable to sit with. Here's what's strange, though. If you talk to people with 100,000 saved, many of them feel exactly as anxious as people with nothing. If you talk to people making six figures, a surprising number of them still lie awake at night running calculations in their heads. And if you find yourself among the genuinely wealthy, people with millions, you'll discover something that almost feels like a cruel joke. A lot of them feel the most financially paranoid of all. This isn't about bad financial decisions. It's not about not making enough. It's not even really about money. And that's exactly what makes it so hard to solve. Most conversations about financial stress start in the wrong place. They assume the problem is a number. Too little income, too much debt, not enough savings. And so the solution they offer is always another number. Save more, earn more, invest more, hit this benchmark, reach that milestone. The logic feels airtight. The fear exists because there's a real gap, and closing the gap closes the fear. But that's not what actually happens in most people's lives. Think about the last time your financial situation genuinely improved. Maybe you got a raise. Maybe you paid off a debt. Maybe you finally built up a little cushion. Do you remember the feeling in those first few days? There was probably some relief, maybe even a moment of real satisfaction. But how long did it last? For most people, it lasted weeks, maybe a month. And then something quiet happened. The baseline shifted. The new number became the new normal, and the anxiety came back, wearing slightly different clothes. This is the part nobody talks about because it doesn't fit into the narrative of financial self-improvement. The narrative needs a finish line. The narrative needs once you do X, you'll feel Y. But real experience keeps proving that story wrong. And still, somehow, the story survives. It survives because the alternative is deeply unsettling. If the feeling of financial safety isn't really tied to your actual finances, then what is it tied to? And if improving your finances doesn't reliably improve that feeling, then what are you actually chasing? There's a concept in psychology sometimes called the hedonic treadmill. The basic idea is that humans have a remarkable ability to return to a relatively stable baseline of well-being, regardless of what happens to them. Good or bad, win the lottery, lose a limb, get a promotion, go through a painful divorce. Studies consistently show that after the initial emotional spike, people tend to drift back toward their personal emotional baseline faster than they ever expected. Financial anxiety operates on something like that same principle, but with an extra layer of cruelty built in. Because with most things, the adaptation goes both ways. You get used to good and you get used to bad. But financial anxiety has a strange asymmetry to it. When things improve, the mind adapts quickly, sometimes almost immediately, and the relief fades. But when things feel threatened, the mind locks in hard and doesn't let go easily. A single unexpected expense, a single news cycle about recession, a single conversation about layoffs, and all that carefully constructed sense of okayness collapses much faster than it was built. Your nervous system is not running financial calculations. It's running threat assessments, and a nervous system that evolved to detect danger is not impressed by a savings account. It was built for a world where threats were immediate and physical. Predators, starvation, abandonment by the group. It does not have a module for adequate emergency fund. It has a module for, are we safe right now, in this moment, given what could go wrong? And the answer to that question, given unlimited imagination, is almost always, not quite. The people who feel this most acutely tend to fall into a few recognizable patterns. Not because they're broken or irrational, but because of how the anxiety learned to operate in their specific lives. There's the person who grew up with financial instability. Maybe money was a source of tension at home. Maybe things were fine until suddenly they weren't. A job loss, a health crisis, a divorce that rearranged everything overnight. The child who experienced that didn't just learn that money can run out. They learned something deeper and more permanent, that safety is an illusion, that the ground can always give way, that no matter how stable things look, there's always a trap door somewhere. That lesson doesn't disappear when you become an adult with a stable income. It becomes the operating system underneath everything else. Then there's the person who grew up financially fine, maybe even comfortable, but absorbed a different kind of lesson. That worth is tied to achievement. That money is how you measure success. That being good with money is a moral quality, not just a practical one. For this person, the anxiety isn't really about survival. It's about identity. The number in the bank account is not just money. It's a verdict on who they are. So no amount is ever quite enough, because no verdict ever quite feels final. And there's the person who has watched enough of the world to know that large-scale things can go wrong. Economic collapses, inflation eroding savings, entire industries disappearing. For them, the anxiety isn't personal insecurity. It's a kind of rational extrapolation that never fully turns off. They're not catastrophizing irrationally. They're pattern matching on a very large canvas, and what they see doesn't offer a lot of guarantees. These are not the same problem. They feel similar from the inside, that low hum of financial unease, but they come from completely different places. And treating all of them as you just need to save more is like treating 3 different illnesses with the same generic painkiller. It mutes the symptom temporarily. It doesn't touch the source. Here's what the financial industry and a lot of personal finance content quietly gets wrong. It assumes that financial security is primarily a practical problem, and so it offers practical solutions. Budgets, emergency funds, investment strategies, passive income streams, the right percentage in the right account at the right age. All of that has real value. None of that is useless, but it's all operating on the assumption that the anxiety is a rational response to a real gap, and that closing the gap closes the anxiety. What it misses is that for most people, the anxiety is not purely rational. It's a feeling, and feelings don't update on spreadsheets. You can show someone with deep financial anxiety their own net worth statement, walk them through exactly how much runway they have, demonstrate mathematically that they are objectively fine, and watch them nod, agree intellectually, and still feel the same knot in their stomach 20 minutes later. Because the knot was never responding to the math, the knot was responding to something else. It's responding to uncertainty. And uncertainty is not something any amount of money can fully eliminate. You can reduce risk, you can build buffers, you can create layers of protection, but you cannot buy your way out of living in a world where things happen that you didn't plan for. And a part of you knows that, very clearly, no matter how carefully you've prepared. This is the thing financial safety promises to solve and never quite can. The fundamental unpredictability of being alive. There's a specific kind of moment that a lot of people recognize, even if they've never put words to it. You're doing well, by any reasonable measure. The bills are covered, there's money set aside, nothing is on fire. And then something small happens. An unexpected car repair, a medical bill, a quarter where the numbers just don't line up the way you expected. And the entire feeling of security evaporates, not just changes, evaporates, as if it was never there. And you're left wondering, if I feel this bad now, after everything I've done to be responsible, what was all of that for? That moment reveals something important. The feeling of financial safety was always fragile, not because your finances were fragile, but because the feeling itself was built on a condition. I am safe as long as nothing unexpected happens, which is another way of saying, I am safe as long as life cooperates, which is another way of saying, you were never really at rest. You were just in a temporary pause between threats. This is the architecture of the anxiety. It doesn't live in your bank account. It lives in the relationship between your current situation and your imagination of what could go wrong. And imagination, as anyone who's spent a night running worst-case scenarios can tell you, has essentially no ceiling. None of this means you should stop saving. None of this means financial preparation is pointless or that the practical work doesn't matter. It absolutely does. A real buffer creates real options. Debt reduction creates real freedom. Smart decisions compound over time in real, tangible ways. The math is not irrelevant, but the math is not the whole story. And pretending it is doesn't help people. It just makes them feel like failures when they do everything right and still feel afraid. What actually shifts for people who do manage to find some version of genuine peace with their finances is usually not a number. It's a relationship. Specifically, a change in the relationship between their sense of self and their financial situation. It's moving from, I am safe when my finances are safe, to something more like, I am capable of handling what comes, whatever that turns out to be. The first statement puts all the power in the account balance. The second puts some of it back in you. That's not a small difference. It's the difference between building a fortress you're constantly afraid will fall and building confidence in your ability to navigate, even when something falls. That shift doesn't happen by reading the right book or hitting the right savings rate. It usually happens through experience, through actually navigating hard things and coming out the other side, through realizing after a genuinely difficult period that you figured it out, that you adapted, that the worst-case scenario you ran in your head was almost never as final as it felt in the imagining. Experience is the only thing that can update the nervous system in a way that a spreadsheet can't, because the nervous system needs evidence. Not projections, evidence. Evidence from your own actual history of solving problems, surviving setbacks, making it through things you were convinced would break you. There's a version of this conversation that ends with a neat resolution. A point where the video tells you that once you understand the psychology, the feeling changes. That awareness is the cure. That knowing this makes you free. That would be a satisfying ending. It would also be a lie. Understanding why you feel financially unsafe does not make the feeling go away. What it does, and this is not nothing, is take away some of its authority. When you know that the anxiety is not a reliable signal of actual danger, you can start to hear it differently, not as a siren you must immediately respond to. More like background noise you've learned to stop mistaking for information. You can acknowledge it without obeying it. You can feel the unease without letting it rewrite your decisions. You can sit with the discomfort of uncertainty, which is just the discomfort of being alive in a world that doesn't offer guarantees, without needing to fix it by chasing a number that will only move again once you reach it. That's not peace in the way people imagine peace. It's something quieter and more durable than that. It's the ability to look at the gap between where you are and where you think you need to be, and notice that the gap never fully closes, and decide consciously to live well anyway. Because that's the thing about the number in your head. It was never a destination. It was always a moving target, and some part of you knew that, even when you were running toward it. The question is what you do with that knowledge. The question is whether you're willing to stop waiting for a feeling that the money was never going to give you and start asking what actually would. That question is uncomfortable. It's also probably the only one worth asking.